in the hospital, and the funds that he raised do incredible things. Like the money he raised, it does change lives. It makes life better, it makes the lives of our children, not just the staff, but for the families and for the mums and dads. Just a small example, this year alone, some of the projects that we're involved in, we've recently just approved 1.6 million for an extension onto our accident emergency service, 70,000 to improve our labs, 80,000 to improve our kitchens. But I suppose the things for me that I think make the most difference aren't necessarily the huge projects. It's not that, obviously they're needed and they are phenomenal, but what makes me passionate about what I do and what makes me so proud to actually meet all of you and to get to know people who've actually decided to help us is when you meet some of the children and you hear their stories. And this year, both Nick and I actually worked on another project together called the Radiothon. And it was a large fundraiser, and we were working in the hospital for the weekend. And over the course of the weekend, we met this girl called Sam. And Sam is an absolutely just top-class girl. She's a 16-year-old cystic fibrosis patient who's basically grown up in Crumlin. She's in and out every 3 or 4 months, probably about 6-7 weeks at a time, since she's been, I think, maybe 2 years of age. And Sam's best friend was a little boy who was 10 years of age, and he passed away this year after 10 years of fighting cystic fibrosis, waiting for a liver transplant or a lung transplant that he didn't get on time. And Sam was it was so emotional because she wrote this little poem about this little boy who she had lost, and he was her best friend, and she was so lonely and she was so heartbroken. And I think what was very difficult was when Sam spoke, she talked about, no one understands what she goes through or how difficult it is to be a teenager or a child who's that sick. And what she finds very difficult is that she never meets people. She meets other kids and they don't understand. And she said it's very, very hard when she's in the hospital to get to know other children. And she wrote this unbelievable poem about this little boy who died. And she sat there and she bawled her eyes out, and I was sitting with her and she was like, how am I going to get to know anybody else? How am I going to get to know other kids in the hospital? There's nowhere for us to hang out. There's nowhere for teenagers in Crumlin. And one of the projects that we have funded this year is an adolescent room. It's just a den, it's nothing fancy, it's a kitchen, it's a little office, and it's a living room. And that's where all the teenagers are going to hang out this year. Basically, it's a room where they can go and they can hang out. You have to be over 13 years of age to be allowed in there. And when I told Sam about this, she just cried and she cried and she cried because she's like, I can get to know other people, I can have friends now who understand. And that's the power of fundraising. That costs 400,000 euros, and on the grand scheme of things, 400,000 euros is not that much money, but it makes such a phenomenal difference to the children and to the patients in Crumlin. And that's what fundraising is about. That's what this entire event is about. All the money you've raised, all the work that you've put in. Just remember that it just makes such a difference. This little girl, she has such a difficult life and she's so much to deal with. And really the thing that worried her most is that she didn't know how she was going to make friends with anybody else who could understand what she's living through. And now we have a facility in Crumlin where she can. There's, all the teenagers kind of hang out there, they can watch their DVDs, they can, currently, you have a 16-year-old sharing a room with a 2-year-old and they watch Barney all the time. They can now go and hang out in this adolescent den and have a bit of fun and get to know some other long-term patients. Other projects that we've been involved in this year have been our bereavement funds. We now have a facility whereby if there's a child in the hospital who's gone into a palliative care stage, they can ring us and say, look, we'd like to do something really special for this particular child, and we can give them the funds. I recently got a phone call and they wanted 150 euros to take a 15-year-old girl who's terminally ill to the guide dogs down in Cork. So fundraise money, it does great things for the children, for the families in Crumlin, and it changes lives and it makes lives better. Our parents' accommodation in the hospital, up until this year, there were no electricity sockets. So you couldn't charge your mobile phone, you couldn't watch your TV, you couldn't switch on a light and read your book at night if you wanted. And you can't imagine, if your child was critically ill, that probably one of the things that you want most is to have your mobile phone so you're contactable. And not to be able to stick your phone in and charge it must be so incredibly stressful. And again, we've fundraised money this year. We've now it's cost us 80,000 euros. We've completely revamped the whole parents' facilities. It's the electricity sockets, they can now have a TV, they can charge their mobile phones, they have new beds, they have a new kitchen facility. That's all through fundraised money. We've got 100 million a year to run the hospital. It's not enough to do, it's enough to just about run the hospital. It's not enough to do things like improve parents' accommodation, to help the adolescents that, you know, that we have in the hospital, to buy new incubators. These are all things, unfortunately, we would love to be able to say that the government has money. It doesn't. So without ye, and without doing the events that you do and helping us in the way you have, and how the rest of the community around Ireland help us, we would never ever be able to provide these services and facilities for the people in Crumlin. And research is also a huge part of what we do. We get absolutely no government funding for our research programme. This year we have launched a new research programme into the genetics of childhood cancer. It's costing us €1 million a year for the next 5 years, but we believe within the next 5 to 10 years we'll actually have a cure for neuroblastoma, which is the most aggressive form of childhood cancer. And they believe if they can understand and treat neuroblastoma, they'll be able to treat all childhood cancers. So it's a phenomenal thing to think that your money is helping to cure childhood cancer, and it's all been paid for out of fundraising money. There is no government support for these projects. So just remember when you go home and when you're talking to people about your triathlon, it's an amazing personal achievement to have got through that triathlon, but it's also an amazing personal achievement to have actually taken the time out of your life to come and to support and to fundraise and to help other people outside of yourselves. And I know probably the triathlon, more than any event, tends to attract the group that probably most of you haven't really had an impact or haven't been involved in Our Lady Hospital. A lot of you probably don't have family yet. So to actually, you know, it's easy to get involved in a cause when you've actually had reason to use it, but to have never used Crumlin and to actually still come out and support it is a really, really fabulous thing. And it's, you know, we so appreciate you doing it for us. On a lighter note, I suppose,